Game loaded.
Hi, and welcome to an edition of Lessons Learned with your host, Rafael Piñero. Welcome to the third Mass Effect and Gaming podcast with Gludipow. Say hello, Gludipow.
Hello, Gludipow.
We're going to be talking about news about the Mass Effect Andromeda leaks, both of plot and footage. And we're also going to be talking about the dreaded Indoctrination Theory. What is it? What it entails, and the ins and out of the theory, and alternatives to the Mass Effect 3 ending. So let's start with the news. There's two big pieces of news that came out this week. One of them was a survey, an online survey, asking several questions, and one of them posits the idea that humanity and the races of the Milky Way will be the would-be conquerors of the Andromeda galaxy. That didn't set very well with a lot of folks. It's like, excuse me? I don't want to play the bad guy. So can you just change that? Of course, it's a survey, so...
Right, and everything in a survey is not final, of course.
But it does show hints of where they're going. And of course, we have, if YouTube decides to cooperate with us, tiny little pieces of leak footage, early footage, probably alpha footage, or even earlier than that, of Mass Effect Andromeda. A warning, of course, this is leaked footage. It doesn't seem to be fake, because it would take a lot of work to fake it, but it has no guarantee that any of the things that you're going to see will in fact be in the end product.
Yeah, as an aside on that one, there is actually a tweet that I'm going to forward to Raphael to use as a screenshot here. That was actually basically tweets between the person that leaked the footage, who's actually an insider, and a fan actually asking about it. And it turns out the footage is actually from 2014. It's based on a 2014 system, so actually all of the footage and everything going on right now is actually even better than it is in the leaked footage.
Yeah, we also remember that we had a change of consoles as well. When this was being produced, really, the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 were still viable consoles. Now, for example, we're looking at a PlayStation 4.5. We're looking at VR. We're looking at a lot of changes in how games are represented. So we could expect even more changes, and we can also expect a little more delays in the process. But so far, we've seen essentially at least one human soldier or marine being taken out by a gas attack by a Krogan. We haven't really seen any alien species, and we've seen something very similar to what we saw in the trailers, which is you can, as a player character, can move around, boosting around on a jetpack, which I think is a pretty cool idea.
Right, yeah, definitely, yeah. Jumping around with the jetpack was definitely something that BioWare mentioned in their discussions regarding the Mass Effect Andromeda game. So, and it was actually in the trailer too, so seeing it in action in small segments of gameplay is actually very interesting. I think it's a very good idea, personally.
I think it also goes into the direction that BioWare is going right now, which is embracing the open world map model or level model. I don't like to call the game itself open world because I have problems with that concept. I prefer sandbox. Because sandbox is more descriptive of gameplay and approach therein, and while open world just really talks about how you move around the world or the map. But either way, having a jetpack means you have a certain amount of verticality. It also signals that, especially in the console side, this generation will be the jetpack generation. Because the original Mass Effect came about in a generation where cover-based shooting was the thing. Taking cover, shooting from cover, using abilities from cover. In the case of Mass Effect, of course, you have teammates that can do the same. And so it wasn't the epitome of it, but it clearly was a reflection of the trends therein. And I think Andromeda would also be a reflection of the mechanics of this generation. The idea that you have bigger worlds, like in Dragon Age Inquisition, and that you can move not only horizontally with chest-high walls and the like, but you can also, probably not everywhere, but in a lot of places you were able to jump or drop down to places you couldn't go before. And I like that because I think it bodes well for something I really like in video games, which is exploration. In order to explore something, you have to be able to get there. And I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, there was a lot more explanation capabilities in Mass Effect 1, which I do believe a lot of fans were wanting back in future installments, and BioWare promised to deliver, and it sounds like they're more than willing to deliver on this one with the whole open world concept, as they said. My only worry is I hope that they don't go the route of like Call of Duty or something like that, and they still have like the whole taking cover and jumping over obstacles like they had in Mass Effect 3. You know, because I don't feel like it would feel the same without those types of elements.
Well, I don't think that cover-based shooting will disappear completely. And if you look at the original games, there was an evolution of that. Like in the first Mass Effect, essentially you got glued to any surface that was nearby. In the second one, it had an active cover system where you had to choose to take cover, and the third one had the same thing, which added vaulting over objects and running and diving around. And I really liked that because that was something that was being attempted to do from the original game. Like there were certain areas where you could sort of climb, but the animation was very slow. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna climb this, and I'm not, and there's nothing to do up here, so I'm gonna climb down again, right?
Right, the ladder system was really glitchy. I remember because I remember at one point in the Leviathan DLC, there was one point where you actually glitched on a ladder and you get stuck up there unless like you were staring at the sky the entire time you were trying to go down the ladder.
Yeah, but that's really a sort of animation type, transition from free movement to animation because the ladders, you don't control the up and down. You just engage in animation and the character goes up or the characters go down. And if there's a problem with transitioning from free movement to the animation, that's usually where the glitch happens. Like the software can't tell, okay, should I be pressing on with the animation? Should I switch back? When do I switch back? And, that's usually what happens in that area. But it can be problematic, especially. That reminds me of an old bug that was very similar. And it wasn't Day of the Tentacle. It was the predecessor, Manic Mansion. That I never managed to finish that game because I had to go up a plant that you had to pour some Pepsi on, and it grew, and basically served as a ladder. I went all the way up the plant, and then I couldn't transition to the next level, which was the final level. So it was like, I did all this stuff, spent hours playing this game, and I just can't finish it. And to this day, I don't know. Well, I know what happens at the end, but I never actually played it myself. So very frustrating.
Okay, but anyway, going back to what we were discussing before regarding the news, there was that whole element that fans were kind of upset with because it was announced the possibility that we would be taking the role of an invading force into this new Andromeda galaxy.
I mean, yeah, there were some of those elements in the original Mass Effect, especially when it came to humanity, in the sense of humanity was the new race in the galaxy, and many other races saw them as described as bullies, as aggressors and attackers, and especially if you took the renegade route. Basically, Shepard sort of came out as being at least a jerk, right? I'm going to do whatever the hell I'm going to do, and I don't care whoever cares about it, It's my way or the highway. But that doesn't necessarily translate to having a lot of races invade, not invade and or occupy an already occupied galaxy. It also brings other questions about world building, the technological levels. I mean, one of the things about the Mass Effect universe so far is that everybody uses the same technology because the Reapers have shaped the cycles in order to maintain a level cap, if you will, a technology cap. So everybody uses Mass Effect technology to travel, uses the mass relays, similar communications technology, the weapons technology is based also on the Mass Effect, etc. But in another galaxy, presumably without their version of the Reapers, it doesn't have to be the Reapers, it could be something else, there's would be no technological cap other than perhaps the same races sort of collapsing on each other for multiple reasons, not just AI. And so they could be either very primitive or very advanced. And that also, I think, puts an interesting twist on who's attacking whom, right? But I think the real problem is the idea that, at least as I was worded, that the bad guys are the natives, right? That the idea that someone comes along, kicks in your door, and you fight back, and that makes you the bad guy, is what I think a lot of people are having problems with. It's like, wait a minute, I live here. This is my space. I don't think people want to. I don't think people want to play necessarily. Not in Mass Effect. Not everybody. I think most people wouldn't care, but a significant portion of the fandom doesn't want to play the bad guys, essentially.
Well, and it's not necessarily the bad guys because it's BioWare is very good at making morally complex problems in the game. As an example, the whole Krogan thing. I can't. What the heck is the word?
The genophage.
Thank you. The genophage. That was a morally gray area because the Krogans are obviously hyper violent and or they're perceived that way anyway, and they have this thing that makes it so that they don't breed at a rapid pace like they normally would, so it controls their population. And a lot of people perceived it as a bad thing, but you also had people that perceived it as a good thing. So there's that, and then there's also multiple others, like whether or not to kill Sidonis and things like that. So BioWare is heavily known for that kind of storytelling. So you got humanity and other races from the galaxy we're familiar with thinking, oh, we have to go to this other galaxy because we could be the last of our species in a kind of like I don't want to say arc, but kind of like that type of scenario because if I recall correctly, there was some hinting that communication with the other galaxy gets cut off. So, they have no idea what's going on with the war in their home galaxy. So, they're going into this other galaxy thinking, well, we're the last ones. So they have to establish a home essentially in order to, get their races reestablished because, continuity and survival and all that the counselor mentions in Mass Effect 3.
Continuity of galactic civilization,
yeah, exactly. So they have their reasons for going and essentially quote unquote invading, while the species that's trying to stop you has their reasons for trying to stop you because you're this invading force and they don't know whether you're hostile or not. And here's actually what the survey line said. It said, Mass Effect Andromeda takes players to the Andromeda galaxy far beyond the Milky Way, where players will lead the fight for a new home in a history territory where we are the aliens, opposed by a deadly indigenous race bent on stopping us. Experience the freedom to traverse and explore a planet-dense but seamless open-world galaxy rich with discovery. Play as the leader of a squad of military-trained explorers in an intense third-person shooter with deep progression and customization systems.
Yeah, I think it's a phrase, deadly aliens, right? It really sort of puts a fact, again, and here's the problem with also having moral ambiguity. Often it can be used to obscure actual non-moral ambiguity, right? You can introduce the idea of moral ambiguity where, at the very least, they should be none, right? Like, oh, I want, and especially done with people who want to, justify things that are very difficult to justify morally, right? It's interesting in game, of course, but the idea of the sort of deadly indigenous race is like, well, yeah, they're fighting back. So, yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see what develops. But I hope that BioWare is the developers of Mass Effect Andromeda are listening to this and, taking notes, right? It's not about eliminating this. It might be just about, just being add a little more nuance, or clarifying the point, if in fact this is what they're going to do.
Well, based on what we know so far, I kind of find the idea a little intriguing, because we've never played what is perceived at first glance as the bad guy, but we have our reasons, like anybody does, just as the opposing force has their reasons.
Mhm.
It's that method where you have to come to an understanding. And I think that because basically what has actually been hinted to us before is that there is going to be some necessary diplomacy involved. So, it's not just fighting. You're going to have to make this other race understand you and understand your reasoning so that, the fighting eventually stops and you're allowed to colonize.
It might also explain why they chose a sort of a Western song, a country Western song in the trailers, right? And the emphasis on deserts and that sort of thing, that kind of scenario, because it sort of has that vibe of being, winning the West, or
How the West was won.
exactly, or settlers coming to the Americas, right? But then again, that has a lot of historical and cultural baggage, which a lot of people are still living to this day. So I think it could be very interesting if handled well. But so we'll have to see. But it can also
Sure.
easily be screwed up. And one notice also on world building is that you're bringing multiple species from another galaxy. 3 of them have the possibility of being explosive breeders. The Salarians, the Krogan, and people might be surprised by this, the Asari. And I think we discussed the Asari before, and that since they live for a very long time, they have hundreds of years.
Well, they breed within each species, and then of course you got the whole implication that we got 2 more species that are being introduced with this new galaxy.
Uh-huh.
So, they can pretty much survive anywhere.
Yeah, the Asari could, essentially, they could breed over hundreds of years, which almost any other species. The Krogan, of course, and Celerias they egg laying, and they lay a lot of eggs. Even under the situation of the Krogan that are in that galaxy still being infected with the genophage, they could still breed a significant amount of people. As in fact, the file on Tuchanka says that there are over 1 billion Krogan in Tuchanka, and Tuchanka is supposed to be a wasteland, so 1 billion is a big number.
Well, considering that this is supposed to take place either just like beginning just as the last Mass Effect battle takes place, or 200 years in the future. We're not sure which, based on different information, but either way, if you cured the genophage, it's highly possible that the Krogan are actually going to be cured of the genophage.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that depends on how much of the original game, if they're going to do something like Dragon Age Inquisition, where they're going to take or allow people to make a save file that charts their progress of the original game.
Yeah, that's what I was actually kind of hoping, is that they would have like a Mass Effect version of the Dragon Age Keep, because that would make things so much easier. If they're going to be taking data from previous saves, it would make it so much easier, instead of having to play through the first 3 games in order to play this new game. And it would actually be new player friendly too, if people are like, well, I don't want to play the Shepard trilogy, or for whatever reason, and I just want to play Andromeda. So that wouldn't be such a bad idea.
Well, I'm of the school of a clean break myself, right? And the reason why, and now we transition to the third subject of the podcast, is the how do I say this, problematic for some, including myself, ending of the trilogy. And among the things that people have suggested as alternatives to the actual ending, whether the original or the one with the extended cut, or the one with Leviathan thrown in, is the Indoctrination Theory. A theory that posits that what you see on screen and what happens in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the game It's really a hallucination of Shepard, who's finally succumbed to the dreaded power of the Reapers to indoctrinate and control other species. So we're going to tackle that, and we're going to tackle a couple of alternatives to that theory, including just Shepard suffering from PTSD and other things. Warning for people who might be listening, Gludipow and I do not agree entirely on this, and you should take anything that we say with a grain of salt, because clearly this is a very touchy subject in the fandom and in gaming in general. So, again, a warning, we're trying to break things down and bring our own analysis to the subject. And with that, we go into the indoctrination theory. So,
Dum, dum,
Gludipow,
dum.
what do you think about it?
To put it lightly, I don't agree with the indoctrination theory. I have multiple reasons for disagreeing with the indoctrination theory. First and foremost is with the indoctrination theory, there's two different versions of it. The first version believes that the indoctrination begins shortly after leaving Earth, while others believe that the indoctrination begins shortly after Shepard is blasted by the Reaper just before reaching the beam. So the fandom can't really agree on when the indoctrination begins. They believe that the indoctrination sequence begins despite, according to the indoctrination theory, that the recurring dreams are a symptom of indoctrination. Furthermore, you have the whole thing where the indoctrination theory is not actually an ending. The whole thing with Mass Effect 3 being the complete ending of the entire saga does not exactly bode well for the indoctrination theory. Essentially because if the indoctrination theory is true and all of the sequences for the endings is just hallucinations to what Shepard thinks happens, you'd still have where Shepard would have to fight the Reapers, or somebody would have to fight the Reapers, or the war would continue, which we know that storyline is not going to be happening in any DLCs or upcoming games at all. So, that kind of does not bode well for the indoctrination theory. Then there's other things that I won't really go into, but those are my top two reasons right now.
Well, my primary reason is I'm going to put my writer's hat on. Right, it's the point where we both put our writer's hat on. And I say that from an analysis of tropes and plot lines, it's a good faith attempt to square one of the problems that I have with the ending is that it seems to me, based on what I saw and experienced, that the ending doesn't jive with the rest of the narrative. So those who are using the indoctrination theory are saying, listen, this doesn't fit. We're going to try to find a way that it does based on the lore, the backstory, and the rules of the universe. And they went to indoctrination, which allows for sort of, very extreme altered states of mind, which could justify it. But as a writer, that fits under the trope of it's all a dream, which a lot of people, including myself, find to be one of the worst ending tropes for any story.
Right.
Which is ironic because, in fact, Mass Effect 3 has that also in the game. A lot of people don't really comment about it, but it's there, and I'll get to it in a moment. But not in the form of indoctrination. Which means that what the ending trope that people like me really don't like about the Mass Effect 3 ending is the shocking swerve, right? The idea of a character or a situation that comes out of nowhere as a surprise twist. That is the whole speech with the Starbrat. And then you can go into, whether it makes sense or not. But the fact that it's there was designed as a sort of final twist when it didn't seem to be needed, just for the, for the purpose of sort of shocking the audience one last time and presenting one final set of options, etc. It's usually an even worse trope because it appears to come out of nowhere. So in lieu of that, we fall into the second worst trope, which is it's all a dream. Now, the thing about it is that I think the writers at some level were sort of conscious of what's going to happen, and they in fact included a trope, and that is in the very end of Mass Effect, the trilogy. You have the talk between the grandpa and the kid, right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be, whether they're on Earth or in an alien world, or simply talking wherever they are. Essentially, it says all of this is a story, right? And we're not really sure whether it's a story told by the grandfather to the grandchild, saying, "Hey, look, when you look at the stars, this is a possibility," right? And and basically the grandfather is just a storyteller and crafted the story of Shepard wholesale for the kid, right?
Well, he did say this all happened so very long ago.
Yeah, but that's like Star Wars. When you start Star Wars or any fairy tale, it's a that's a way that you say it's like in a very a long time ago in a very far away place. So it has that sense of being mythic, and I mean that's the thing about kids. If you're a grandparent talking to a kid, depending on the age, you don't want to tell them outright that you sort of made it up completely, because kids have different understandings of what is and isn't reality. So one of the ways to sort of make it easier for a child to absorb something, say, you know what, this didn't happen yesterday. It happened so far, a long time ago that very so few people know about it, but it could be real, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so as that final scene, I think, was designed to introduce that sense of doubt that allows for anything. Well, you didn't like it. Well, it doesn't matter because it's all, it's all a dream. It's all a story. You liked it. Well, yeah, it happened to be a true story in this universe, right? It allows for the audience to believe whatever they want to believe about the ending, and it serves as
Mm-hmm.
a sort of a author's or writer's saving throw, right? If they liked it, they're not gonna bother. They're not gonna be bothered by the fact that it's a story in universe. And if they didn't like it, they can always say it's all a dream, like the indoctrination theory. One of the things about the indoctrination theory in universe, we talk about the lore, and I would cut the fan hat again, is that we see the crew of the Normandy SR1 and SR2 are very resistant to indoctrination. They are constantly in contact with, Reaper technology, and yet none of them seem to succumb to it. Whether it's Shepard, whether it's any of the teammates in the two games, which is weird. One would think that at least one of them would have fallen to it. Other people constantly fall into indoctrination. The people at the base,
Mm-hmm.
and around the
Well,
Alpha Relay, etc. But the Shepard team never falls into it.
right. There's a
So
lot. There's a lot of indoctrination symptoms that Shepard does not display, and I tend to notice that a lot of people who believe in the IT tend to nitpick at the most minute of details, which I don't know. As somebody who knows video games, I kind of find that kind of odd because like, oh, they started running or this animation, and it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean anything in conjunction with the IT. That could just be like like how they animated it. Like maybe it was an animation mistake or lazy animation, because like the whole thing with the ending is, if I recall correctly, it was actually admitted that like one writer was responsible for the ending, and he's actually on the team of the current Mass Effect Andromeda, Ian something or other. Forgive me. Names of things and people are not doing well for me this morning. But yeah, basically, if I recall, that was that whole deal with the ending. So it doesn't necessarily mean that IT had anything to do with it. Just very very bad writing on the ending, which I believe in that case many people will agree with. And I can understand people's need to want to explain away the ending with an indoctrination theory, and I don't think it's not plausible. I just think it's very unlikely. So I'm actually more in favor of the PTSD theory than I am with the indoctrination theory. Because with the indoctrination theory, you got the whole dream inside of a dream thing, and then by that point we're within Inception territory, and I'm steering clear of that.
yes, it does have its problems. I mean, I also heard other theories like the points of light and other stuff. But you mentioned the PTSD theory.
Hmm.
In fact, that's the first time I heard about it. I mean, I heard about Shepard suffering from PTSD during the third game, and we can talk about that as well. But what exactly does it mean? I mean, where does it come from, and what does it exactly mean to Shepard be suffering from PTSD, and how does that contrast with the indoctrination theory?
Well, in terms of like with the whole thing with Shepard is there are many parallels to suggest that Shepard is actually suffering from PTSD. It doesn't exactly accurately depict PTSD, but there is the whole survivor's guilt bit that is present within the dreams, which is also a form of PTSD, survivor's guilt. Basically, with Shepard's dreams is you have the fact that they began after Shepard witnessed the death of a child on Earth, which is actually very common with symptoms of PTSD. You could have soldiers that are veteran soldiers and have been veteran soldiers for years, but won't have symptoms of PTSD manifest until after witnessing the death of a child. This is not always the case, obviously, but there are many cases of this occurring. And in terms of the dreams, you know, you have these shadows that start to appear over the course of the game as more teammates are dying, and the words that they're uttering are the last sentences that Shepard heard them say, which, you know, is very possible as a symptom of survivor's guilt. At one point in Mass Effect 2, Sidonis describes what he is experiencing if you allow him to talk to Shepard. What he is experiencing is actually also survivor's guilt, which is why Shepard says there's nothing left of him to kill. So, you know, there's that whole thing that Shepard is starting to suffer from that. And I feel like, you know, I believe that it's actually, in my opinion, it's better to say that Shepard is going through PTSD and survivor's guilt as opposed to indoctrination, because yeah, Shepard is just human and is prone like anybody else to indoctrination, but Shepard is also very much human and a soldier and very susceptible to psychological problems like PTSD. So, you know, you're making Shepard look mortal one way or the other.
Yeah, my one problem it is we've seen multiple characters starting with, if you play, for example, the Spacer in the first game. The side quest for the Spacer in the first game is you meet someone who was a Marine on the ground during an attack on a colony. It is in Akuz, by the way. And you see the survivors of the attack on Akuz with the Thresher Maws. And we see other characters, humans and aliens, basically suffering from the after effects of very traumatic, usually warlike experiences. If you're the sole survivor, there's a young woman who was taken as a slave, etc. So this is something that's very common in the game. What I find a bit problematic from a writer's point of view is that we really don't see a lot of that during Mass Effect 2, where in fact something extremely traumatic happened to Shepard. They died and then came back to life. And at no point, except for just making a couple of jokes and asking a couple of questions, do you have Shepard, for example, remembering the moment of their death. I mean, you can't find more traumatic situation than, you know, dying of suffocation. And then all of a sudden you're awake again and you're being brought back from the dead, something that should be impossible. And yet Shepard, throughout Mass Effect 2, sort of laughs it up. He or she or they, I keep referring to Shepard as a hybrid character, sort of are more frustrated by the fact that their friends don't, you know, the Vermar survivor doesn't seem to care for them anymore as a friend or something more different. And it's only Mass Effect 3 where you have the recurrent dreams, which fits. I mean, it's good for Mass Effect 3, but I would expect something to happen earlier. And also, you don't have the sort of final confrontation of Shepard confronting the fact that they died until almost the very end of the third game when they see some videos. It's like, you met Liara and she told you that she brought the body to ship to Cerberus. Miranda is there and said that she was part of your reconstruction, and yet at no point Shepard, who is pretty smart character often, doesn't seem to connect the points. Is never given a chance to confront Miranda. I think they can confront Liara, but it's done in sort of a renegade type of situation. Either you sort of, it's either or. It's like, oh, thank you for saving my life, or how dare you. There's no middle ground. There's no space, and probably limitations of the game as well, to discuss it before, during, or after. In the way that other and minor NPCs sort of get a chance to express their post-traumatic stress disorder as well as their survivor guilt. Even Shepard, when confronted with the situation with Akuz, which is, by the way, it's glitched because most of that dialogue should only happen if Shepard was the survivor. Sorry, the idea with the slave girl is the Shepard from the colonist background. So survivor is Akuz and the attack from the Thresher Moss.
Right.
But the game treats anyone who goes into that mission, talks to Corporal Toombs, as, even the name is a bit creepy, as if you were the sole survivor. So,
Right.
it's just some glitches there. But I would expect to see signs sooner, much sooner.
Right. Well, because like that whole soul survivor thing, you would think that would have affected Shepard psychologically, but they didn't write that in. And in terms of like the recurring dreams with Mass Effect 3, I kind of think that while I do believe that it's a sign of PTSD, I also think that BioWare was intending to go the direction of PTSD, but they didn't really explore that too much because a soldier experiencing PTSD is kind of difficult because PTSD, when you experience it, you're generally triggered by something and you relive that nightmare over and over and over again. And I think partly Shepard has been through so many nightmares, it's hard to have Shepard relive all of them within the sequence of one video game. So, I think they took some creative liberties, there, as well as kind of did some lazy writing with those dreams because the whole dream sequence thing is something that like 98% of writers do to invoke emotion without having to do a whole heck of a lot. Because basically PTSD is not running slow motion and through a bunch of inky shadows.
Yeah.
So I do think that there was some lazy writing there, and I think there was some lazy writing in terms of the ending too. But BioWare is allowing interpretations, which is why they haven't clarified yay or nay on the indoctrination theory. They're just, going ahead with the game as is. They're leaving the trilogy with Shepard alone and they're moving on. So, but like I said before, that's one of the reasons why I don't believe in the indoctrination theory is because, the Shepard's story is ended. Where if the indoctrination theory was true, it wouldn't have ended. There would still be a fight going on.
Yeah, another aspect also talking about triggers, and there are many of them that could have triggered Shepard at any moment. We talk about backstory, Akuz, also the assault on the pirate moon as well.
Right.
In Ruthless background, and I blank on the name. I apologize. And also the Prothean beacons.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
because Shepard had to witness the extinction of an entire race.
And Shepard has to experience it multiple times because there's two beacons. There is Liara going into Shepard's mind and then sort of unlocking things, as well as the fact that when he or she meets Shiara and hands out the Prothean cipher in order to allow it, in order to unlock what it means, then again they experience it. And if you go into a side quest in Mass Effect 2, they have the same vision again, and this vision is modified by you see in that vision they added the collectors where it wasn't in the original. And then in Mass Effect 3, almost every time you talk to Javik and they do the whole body touching thinking thing, they have visions similar to that. And he also gets to see multiple times how the planet that now it's Eden Prime was also ravaged by the Reapers. So
Right.
time and time again, Shepard, yeah, you might say, well, these are aliens, but when you have the certainty of a power that can come in and wipe out an entire galactic civilization, a galactic civilization that you know for a fact is far superior to you or technologically, yeah, it's gonna give you, it's gonna mess with you. Even though it says, Shepard has an incredibly strong mind, but there's a difference between, okay, I'm not bleeding out of my ears versus, yeah, I'm having these funky nightmares, right? There's the vast gulf between those two extremes.
Right. Well, and in certain conversation cues with Garrus and Liara, Shepard does express how like everything that happened on Earth before getting on the Normandy is actually weighing on his or her mind heavily. So I think they did definitely attempt to make the stress and weight, the overall weight of the responsibility of saving the galaxy from a hyper-advanced race. They did make that attempt there. I think they kind of missed the goal on that one.
Yeah, I think it's more about timing than anything else. Rather than, and also I think that especially because a main criticism against Mel Shep is that, especially in the early games, in the first game, the voice sounds very wooden, very much Space Marine, get the job done kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very little
Kind of
emotion,
flat.
very flat. I think they try to introduce this situation to humanize Shepard, right? Although you can humanize Shepard in multiple ways, right? And I don't think his voice acting was that bad, because I feel that both voice actors were trying to find their way in the first episode, right?
Well, I feel like Mark Muir didn't have nearly as much experience in voice acting, especially for a video game. Or at least that's what I think anyway, compared to Jennifer Hale. Because I believe Jennifer Hale, by that point, had experiences in other voice acting gigs, whereas, Mark Muir was still kind of an unknown at the time.
Yeah, but he still delivers, I think.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, I can see that both of them really were sort of feeling their way and feeling out the character in the first game.
Right.
And you can see the progression of the voice and the acting. Like, I think
Right.
we mentioned this in another episode where, Jennifer Hale's Shepard is more of a teen mom, at least that's my opinion, where Shepard really goes into sort of the awkward dad slash sort of, Marine with a great speech, action hero kind of guy. And so each one of them sort of started defining their version of Shepard as they grew into the characters, which is good if you have like 3 games and multiple DLCs to do that, right? But yeah, I think that perhaps the idea of injecting sort of the sense of stress and humanity and basically introduce the idea of a flawed character outside of the player's decisions, Renegade or Paragon, into the third game, perhaps was a reaction to that.
Right. Yeah, they definitely tried to humanize the protagonist a little bit more than they did in the first 2 games, I feel. They did start to humanize Shepard a little bit more with the whole coming to the realization of being dead for, like, I think it was 3 years. So, there was that, but I feel like Shepard kind of shook it off really fast. Because, like, the first, like, 10 minutes and then we don't hear anything else about it.
Which I think is a great missed opportunity of the second game, right? I like the story of the second game. If I were to rate the games individually, I would do so in this manner. Best story, the original game, with the mechanics, being a transitional game, they were experimenting with a couple of things and not everything came out right. The second game has the best mix of mechanics and
And story.
And the third game really shines on mechanics, but the story is a bit of a mess.
Right. Yeah. No,
Has
number
some
two is definitely my favorite of the trilogy. I did like Mass Effect 1, but the mechanics really turned me off to it. Otherwise, I would probably play it a lot more than I do. But definitely Mass Effect 2 is my favorite.
But I would say though I like it because of the it has the right mix. The story in Mass Effect 2 in some areas it's shallower, and it's not necessarily because it's bad writing, but because you can feel that they could have gone places, like try to explore the idea of Shepard being alive and dead, right? A new Shepard versus the old Shepard. I mean, they touch it on that a little bit. There's times where Shepard can say, "That's not me anymore," etc., or romancing someone else that was before, or accepting or rejecting the dog tags. But it's very intermittent. Right? It's here and there. It's not a theme that unifies the storyline, unifies the character. And definitely we're going to have to talk about this in a future installment about basically the death of Shepard and how it was used as a reset button for the entire series and all the situations that came up with it. But as an advance notice, I would say that resetting Shepard by killing them and then bringing them back to life sort of forced the idea that you had to ignore any of the character growth that was in an original game in order to allow new players, especially players that want to play on the PlayStation eventually, to interact with a fresh Shepard. So I think design elements and outside elements, the introduction of electronic arts into the whole thing, etc., led to that decision. And by 3, they felt that they had to sort of cram a lot of stuff that they should have been able to develop earlier, especially the Shepard's character development.
Right. Basically, what I wanted to touch on too is since I feel like we're getting a little bit off track here, in terms of like with the indoctrination theory, what we were talking about before, if we recall, at least 2 or 3 times throughout the entire Mass Effect series, not counting 3 just yet, there are at least 2 or 3 times where Shepard goes into Reaper involved areas, or places where Reaper tech is present with companions. But I feel like the indoctrination theory focuses too much on Shepard being indoctrinated despite the companions being present through several instances. But people try to say that Shepard is involved with all this stuff way more. As far as I can recall, Shepard is involved only like once or twice more than companions. And yet Shepard is the only one that's supposed to get indoctrinated in the theory.
Yeah, and you can also bring companions that had been, touched in those previous occasions, like Garrus and Tally, into the new situation. For example, you have the attack on or the exploration of the Dead Reaper. A Reaper is supposed to be dead, but managed to indoctrinate the entire Cerberus crew and turn them into husks. You have the Arrival, which is a similar situation. Object Row. Shepard gets hit on head first with a blast of energy, I suppose, that probably is also probably linked to indoctrination, and gets a vision of the Reapers reaching a relay, probably the Alpha relay, and yet Shepard continues, but everyone else in the in the facility is indoctrinated. And it's very interesting. You compare the sort of the voice logs from and the way that the people in the Arrival act. At no point does Shepard say, well, maybe we should reconsider this whole galactic invasion thing. Maybe, it might not be such a bad idea. He's always against it, everybody on their team is like, yeah, we have to stop the Reapers, right?
Right.
We never hear talking to, in fact, when he talks to the Elusive Man in third game, as he talks to Kenton in the Arrival, he's saying, you're crazy. Whether Renegade or Paragon basically says, you're not right in the head. Also, and this is very interesting, and we're told outright, the Protheans had the ability to detect indoctrination. And so in the first game and the third game, we have two VIs, Vigil and Vendetta, who basically said, you are not indoctrinated.
Right.
We detected indoctrinated forces. You're not it.
Right. Well, and there's the argument by some people who believe that the indoctrination didn't occur until after the blast, before the beam. But even then, you got the interactions with the elusive man, and you don't get the option to agree with the elusive man. Either way, you're telling the elusive man that he's batshit. So, if you're actually indoctrinated and the whole sequence after reaching the beam is supposed to be some kind of a dream, then, why would you not have the option to agree with the elusive man? Why would you be trying to convince him that he's indoctrinated, telling him that he's batshit, and not, agreeing with him in any sense of the word? Not agreeing that the Reapers could be controlled or that synthesis was possible.
Yeah, and even in the extended cut, going back to the ending, you are giving a choice to basically tell the space brat to fuck off.
Right, you can shoot him.
Mind you, that it's a game over. You lose. But
well, in a sense you do, because you still get an ending where you see the grandfather and the grandchild, just they don't look human anymore.
Yeah. And that's it. You get that. So even then, even what I think of the extended cut was an attempt to, again, convince us, or those people who disagree, that what they were doing was the right thing to do. You ain't still given that choice, right? So again, multiple times Shepard could act like he's agreeing with the Reapers or accepting the Reapers, etc. And time again, he says, no, I'm not going to do it, right? Because indoctrination is about, agreeing with the Reapers and falling in their sway. At no point, well, ironically, I could argue that by activating and choosing one of the choices that the Star Child gives you, that yes, you are doing what they want to do. But that's sort of the very end. And even then, one could argue that one or more of those choices doesn't really fit what the Reapers were doing anyway, which is, conquering and harvesting the galaxy. Right. Whatever you think that harvesting really means. Some people think that actually means preserving species. Again, I don't agree, but that's part of the argument as well.
Right. Well, and then there is a segment of gameplay footage that was not completed, so some mouthing was not finished, but there is a segment of an extended Anderson conversation that I found that supposedly further disproves the indoctrination theory. I can actually forward it to you so you can insert it in the final product, but basically a lot of people are saying that footage disproves the indoctrination theory, and could probably put it in here as a segment for people to view themselves and decide for themselves whether it does or not. But I feel like there's a lot of holes in it, and I will relent that the theory would be nice if it were true, but I feel like there's just no way that it could be.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, again, like I said in the beginning, it points to the fans' need to have a coherent, if not necessarily consistent, approach to the whole story, right? Because that's the thing about Mass Effect. It was billed B-I-L-L-E-D as opposed to built, in the idea that it was a close myth arc, right? It was a trilogy with 3 acts, etc. And then we'll talk about that in a future program. And that means that you would think that the ending would be part of that conclusion of the trilogy and should fit into the overall story. And I think a lot of fans feel that it doesn't. And being of the, I would call the wonk faction, the need to use the story itself, the lore, etc., to sort of find a solution to the perceived problem is what led to the creation of the indoctrination theory and its popularity, right? It fits. It feels to fit, right? It seems to validate certain thoughts and ideas that people have about the ending. But I'm going to say one final thought on the ending is that eventually most of the discussions about the ending are not about the ending itself. They're about how people feel about the ending, whether you like it or not. It's come to the point, I think, that we're sort of talking past each other and trying to convince each other that we are right, regardless of what facts are brought into the table. Which
Right.
happens in fandom, of course, right? But yeah, I think it's gotten to that point.
Right.
And the indoctrination theory is just one permutation of that.
Right. My theory or my opinion is right, yours is wrong, and that's just the bottom line.
Well, we had a very interesting discussion this week, as always. Gludipow is our welcome guest and the person who really does most of the work. So congratulations to her. And if you like this or any video on my channel, please, oh please, comment and subscribe, and we will see you when we see you. Good night.
Bye-bye.